When I looked down at my twisted leg bone sticking through my skin, I knew I was going to die on that cliff. But something inside me refused to give up. What happened next defies everything doctors say about human limits. Hello. Today I'm going to tell you about the most impossible moment of my life. My name is Jake Morrison. I'm 29 years old and I've been a professional rock climber for 12 years. I live in Colorado and I know every rock of Rocky Mountain National Park. I've climbed the most difficult routes worldwide. But that day, the solo climb I did on Long's Peak changed my life forever. Everything started on the morning of October 23rd. It was a perfect autumn day. Clear weather, calm wind, temperature 46 degrees Fahrenheit. Ideal conditions for solo climbing. That morning, I had left camp at 5:30 a.m. and started the Diamond Face route alone. This route was level 5.10, a technical climb with about 1,300 feet of elevation gain. When solo climbing, my safety equipment was limited. I only had climbing shoes, helmet, chalk bag, and emergency kit. No rope. This was free solo climbing, just you and the rock. You make one mistake, you fall. It's that simple. I climbed the first 650 feet without problems. The rock quality was perfect, holds were solid. Since I'd known this route for years, every step was memorized. At 9:30 a.m., I was at about 820 feet high, approaching the chasm view section. This is where everything went wrong. As I placed my left foot on a ledge, the rock piece broke off. The support I expected was suddenly gone. My weight was entirely on the small ledge my right hand was holding, but that couldn't hold either. The fall moment felt like a lifetime, but actually lasted 3 seconds. 60 feet, about 60 feet, I fell down. As I gained speed, I saw the surface I would hit. Not flat rock, but a rough area full of sharp rocks and ledges. The first impact was on my left leg. I heard the bone-breaking sound, crack. Then a terrible wave of pain covered my body. The second impact hit my ribs. 3 of them broke at once. The third impact hit my shoulder and dislocated it. Finally, I stopped by hitting a steep cliff with my back. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Everything hurt, but the pain in my left leg was unbearable. When I looked down, I saw why. My femur bone, the long bone between hip and knee, had pierced through my skin and come out. Compound fracture, the worst kind of injury. Bone fragment outside, bleeding, very high infection risk. There was no recovery from this injury without medical help. The first 10 minutes I was in shock. I felt like I would faint from pain, but I forced myself to stay conscious. I started analyzing my situation. Where I was located was quite far from the main climbing route. The area where I fell wasn't visible. Nobody was climbing here. I had my cell phone but no signal. At this altitude, between rock walls, finding signal was very difficult. My GPS was working, and I knew my location exactly. 8 miles from the main road, on the north face of the mountain. At 10 a.m., I had to accept the reality. Nobody was coming. Search and rescue teams wouldn't start even after 24 hours because I hadn't told anyone my return time. The classic mistake solo climbers make. I had 2 options, stay here and die, or try to crawl 8 miles to reach the main road. The second option seemed impossible, but at least it was a chance. First, I needed to stabilize my injured leg. I had emergency splint material in my bag, aluminum rods and elastic bandage. I couldn't directly splint the compound fracture, but at least I could limit movement. I didn't try to push the bone fragment back inside the skin. This could cause more damage. Instead, I wrapped gauze around it, tried to control bleeding. I placed the splint on both sides of the leg and tied it tightly. I needed to put my shoulder dislocation back in place. This was a very painful process, but it had to be done. I leaned against a rock and tried to put the shoulder back by moving my arm at certain angles. On the third try, it went back in place with a pop sound. There wasn't much I could do for the ribs. I was careful to take shallow breaths and tried not to break them more. I had ibuprofen in my bag as a painkiller. I took 800 milligrams. At 11:30 a.m. I started moving. I couldn't stand up, so I had to crawl, dragging my left leg without pulling it, moving with my hands and right leg. In the first 100 meters, I realized this would be the hardest job in the world. Every movement was painful. Sharp rocks were cutting my hands, but stopping meant death. Proper technique was very important while crawling. I was distributing my weight to my hands and right knee. I used my left leg as little as possible. I would crawl 20 times and rest, then crawl 20 times again. In the first hour, I could only advance 200 meters. At this speed, 8 miles would take 40 hours, but I didn't have that much time. Internal bleeding, infection, dehydration, all of these could kill me. In the afternoon, crawling became a bit easier. My body was starting to get used to the pain. Adrenaline was still high, but new problems started emerging: thirst and fatigue. My water bottle had broken when I fell. Only half a liter of water remained. This was definitely not enough for 8 miles. There was no snow because it wasn't winter yet. I needed to find stream water. At 3 p.m. I found a small stream. The water looked clear, but I couldn't boil it. I had water purification tablets. I dropped one tablet and waited 30 minutes. Meanwhile, I checked my leg's condition. The splint was holding, but swelling had increased. There were no signs of infection yet, but the risk was very high. I sprayed antiseptic around the wound. I wrapped new gauze. Afternoon crawling became even more difficult. The sun was starting to set, and it was getting cold. In October in Colorado mountains, night temperatures could drop below freezing. Hypothermia risk was starting. At 6 p.m. I tried to crawl faster in the last light of the day. Moving in darkness was very dangerous. One wrong move could lead to other injuries. When the sun set, I took out my flashlight. Battery life was limited, so I would only use it when necessary. There was moonlight, but clouds were mostly covering it. Crawling at night was a nightmare. Every movement was more painful. My muscles had stiffened due to cold, but stopping also meant death. I continued advancing very slowly. At 10 p.m., I took my first major break. After 4 hours of crawling, I had covered about 1.5 miles. My speed was increasing because my technique was improving, but fatigue was at its peak. I continued crawling throughout the night. Every hour I took 15-minute breaks. I had to stay in constant motion to preserve body heat. Sleeping meant death. At 6 a.m., when the sun rose, I had covered about 4 miles, halfway. But my condition was getting worse. The swelling in my leg had increased. My fever had risen. Infection was starting. The water situation was also serious. I had drunk the last drops. I had to find another water source. Fortunately, there was morning dew. I tried to collect dewdrops on the rocks. Very little, but better than nothing. Second day crawling was even harder. My hands were now covered in blood. My knees were open wounds, but I didn't stop. 20 crawls, break. 20 crawls, break. Hours passed like this. In the afternoon at 2 p.m., I found the second stream. This time it was a bigger flow. The water looked cleaner. I had used my last tablet. I took a risk and drank directly. It felt very good to my body. During this break, I looked at my wounds. The wound on my leg was infected. Red lines were starting to appear. There was sepsis risk. I used my antiseptic for the last time. All my medicines were running out. In the afternoon at 4 p.m., 2 miles remained. I was very close to the main road now, but this was also my hardest moment. After 30 hours of crawling, my body was exhausted, but I didn't give up. At 7 p.m. in the evening, I heard a sound in the distance. Car engine. I had reached the main road. I tried to shout, but my voice wouldn't come out. I waved my flashlight. The first car didn't stop. The second car stopped. The woman who got out screamed when she saw me. "My God, what happened to you?" I could only say, "Fell. Hospital." The woman immediately called 911. The ambulance came 10 minutes later. The paramedics were amazed when they saw my condition. "You crawled 8 miles?" they asked. "How is this possible?" At the hospital, Surgeons repaired my leg in 6 hours. They connected the bones with metal plates and screws. I stayed in the hospital for 3 weeks. Physical therapy lasted 8 months. The doctors explained to me the factors that enabled my survival. First, I had avoided brain damage by protecting my head during the fall. Second, I had properly splinted the compound fracture. Third, I had avoided hypothermia by staying in motion. Fourth, I hadn't stopped despite the infection. Fifth, I had dealt with every problem, including dehydration. But most importantly, I had never given up. This experience taught me many things. First lesson: when doing solo activities, always inform someone of your plan. Second lesson: emergency kit should always be with you. Third lesson: basic first aid knowledge saves lives. Fourth lesson: the human body is capable of incredible things. You are much stronger than your limits. Fifth lesson: giving up is not an option. Fight until your cells die. After this incident, I continued climbing, but much more carefully. I never do free solo alone anymore. I always use safety equipment. And most importantly, I always tell someone where I'm going. Today, I still carry the effects of that fall. I have metal plates in my left leg. It hurts in cold weather, but I can walk, I can run, I can even climb again. This story taught me how precious life is. Every day is a gift, and with the right mindset, determination, knowledge, even things that seem impossible can be achieved. My advice to you: if you do extreme sports, never neglect safety precautions. Learn basic medical knowledge. Prepare emergency plans. Because the difference between life and death sometimes comes down to being prepared. Thank you for listening to me. If you learned something from this story, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. You can share your own outdoor experiences in the comments. See you in my next survival story. Take care of yourselves.